Morning, everyone. Welcome to the UBC Learning Circle, hosted by the Center for Excellence in Indigenous Health. I'm very pleased to be joined today by Chett Monague, who's participating over webinar, Claudia, and Holly to talk to us today about pathways to post-secondary education. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that we are on the traditional, ancestral, unceded, and occupied territories of the Hunkaminam-speaking Musqueam people. I would also like to acknowledge the First Nations Health Authority for generously funding the circle. So those of you participating today, the topics we cover can sometimes be sensitive or emotionally triggering. If you need some support, please look after yourself. Talk to a friend, elder, family member, counselor. Just get the support that's needed. So, introductions. My name is Cole. I'm from the Chewatho First Nation. I'll be facilitating the session today. Off camera, but in the room, we have team members in Jordy, our assistant coordinator, and Cynthia, our production coordinator. Chett is from Chimnasing, located on Georgian Bay in Ontario. He is the recruiter advisor Aboriginal students with the University of British Columbia, and in that role he handles the outreach, advising, and recruiting of Indigenous learners from across Canada. Holly is a UBC alumni who's been working at the university for 12 years. In her current role, Holly supports current and prospective students as a first point of contact to help develop financial strategies to cover post-secondary education expenses. Claudia comes from the Kabwek First Nation, part of Anishinaabe Algonquin Nations. As an ES advisor for UBC, Claudia specifically works with current students on financial advising matters. Claudia was previously a band-sponsored student, so she now uses that experience to help break down financial barriers for prospective and current Indigenous students. With that, I wanted to welcome you all, Chett as well, to the circle. I'm really excited about the topic, so let's dive into it.
Okay, so good morning, everybody. I know that we already had a short little introduction, but again, my name is Chett Monague. So today we're here to talk about pathways to post-secondary education. And we wanted to start with this slide so you guys get a better view of who we are and our actual names. But this is also to give you guys a heads up that when you're starting the process to apply to post-secondary education, there are a team of supports that are going to be available for you no matter which university you're at. Here at UBC, we have a team of people, and we're just 3 of the faces that you're going to be seeing today. But even within recruitment, there's about 3 or 4 of us who help with the Indigenous portfolio, as well as our partners in the enrollment services advisor roles. So when you're thinking about your pathways to post-secondary education, there are many pathways that you can start with. We're going to talk about our pathways specifically to UBC, but these pathways are also available or can be available at other universities as well. So I'm going to start off with one that's really, really important here at UBC, and this is our Aboriginal Access Studies. These are also known as access or bridging style programs. So what are these upgrading programs and how do they help? So one of the biggest things that these programs do is that they help us when students are not necessarily admissible, or if students need additional help to get into their programs of choice. Now, the Aboriginal Access Studies program is hosted here at the University of British Columbia on the Okanagan campus, and it's hosted by our Aboriginal Programs and Services Department. Here on campus, it's an entrance program that prepares and transitions learners into undergraduate degree programs at UBC's campus. Students take 3 university-level courses per term, and that actually apply into their degree program of choice. Now, while they're studying at the Aboriginal Access Studies program, I don't know what happened there. While they're studying in the Aboriginal Access Studies program, they need a minimum of 60% in all of those 6 courses for that first year to be guaranteed admission into any program here on campus. Sorry about that little hiccup there, folks, but As we're going through, if you do have questions, please feel free to ask those questions in the chat and we can address those as we're going through as well. With this program as well, and something to consider with these access or bridging style programs at other universities is if your students are actually considered full-time students. Now, as many of you know, especially if you're coming from communities or you're registered with a First Nation, having full-time status affects your band funding. So specifically with the Aboriginal Access Studies program, you are considered a full-time student, even though you are taking 3 courses a term, and we make sure that we work with your band to provide that full-time band funding. The next program and partnership that we have is with Langara College. So if students are not necessarily prepared or ready to enter right directly into the university, we highly recommend that you start off in a college. Colleges help prepare you for things that you may not have been prepared for in high school. One of the biggest things is learning the speed of a post-secondary institution. Colleges are a really good place to start that, and a really good place to get a hang of what the speed and what the difference will be between high school and post-secondary education. Another really big thing that they help with is building maturity. A lot of students don't realize that it does take a lot of growing and a lot of maturity to be successful in post-secondary education, and this is a really good place to start when you're looking to pursue that educational journey with a post-secondary institute. Now, our partnership with Langara College is specific for our Vancouver campus because Langara College is also located in Vancouver. But all of our undergraduate degree programs on UBC's Vancouver campus are a part of this partnership agreement. Students have to apply and be admitted into Langara College and then apply into the Aboriginal Transfer Partnership. When they are accepted into the ATP for short, they need to maintain a minimum of a 2.67 GPA, complete all the specific prerequisites at Langara, as well as the prerequisites for UBC, and then they can be admitted to any of the UBC undergraduate degrees and specific to their choice. Now, this partnership is also eligible for all of our transfer scholarships, our major entrance scholarships, or our Centennial Scholars Award. As we're going through, now I told you about 2 different pathways already, but this one is going to be the most specific for your students that you're supporting who are coming directly from high school. Now, our direct from high school pathways are very, very simple. We bring this slide up here because we are going to be sending out a link to our 2018 view book, and this is going to be the most the easiest way to read that view book. So when you're going through on pages 16 and 17, it'll show you all of our undergraduate degree programs and faculties that we have available here at UBC. Now, if we start with this blue banner that you'll see here, this is going to be our faculty or our school. The next part here is going to be our program specialization, or the program that they may potentially be interested in. So the example here that we have is the Bachelor's of Commerce on the Vancouver campus, and the specialty is accounting. The last point I want to make on this slide, and for your resources from that PDF, is this green dot here. All of our programs and faculties are split between our two different campuses, and you can see which campus the program specialization is going to be on if you use the legend on the side here. So all of the green dots are on our Vancouver campus, and all of the orange triangles are going to be on our Okanagan campus. So as we get further along into our program prerequisites, that's going to be important to know. So with our academics, and especially direct from high school, we have a couple of different assessment tools that we're using this year. But as students are beginning their applications to UBC, the website that they need to go to is you.ubc.ca. This will have all of our online application systems that students will need to use. But in the application specific from BC, we don't ask you to produce what's called an academic profile anymore. We connect with the BC Ministry of Education to record and gather all of the program information from all of our students from BC. Anyone joining us from outside of BC today, all of your students will still have to produce what's called an academic profile, which is just a summary of all their grades from grade 11 and grade 12. And we'll use that to begin their assessment for admission to UBC. Now, some of our requirements, across the university, we have general requirements, and these are just some of them. So there's no minimum number of courses required for application to UBC, but we do recommend that you have at least 6 grade 12 level courses. We use these courses for our assessments. We have 2 different assessments. The first one is our overall assessment, where we look at all of your academic grade 11 and all of your academic grade 12 courses to get an overall GPA from, from your high school courses. So we can get a better picture of who your students are and how well they've done in the past. The next assessment that we use is a core assessment. In the core assessment, we use your highest level provided from core subject areas specific to their degree. So what that means is in a program like science, you'll be looking at core subject areas like math and competition, sciences and language arts, and we would look at all of the highest levels. Now, it's not the highest grade, so if you have a higher grade in grade 11 than you do in a grade 12 course, we're still going to look at the grade 12 course because that is the highest level. And lastly, is our degree-specific prerequisites. So those at UBC have not changed. All of our degree-specific prerequisites are going to be exactly the same from previous years. So if you have students who have been tracking to UBC, it's still possible that they are admissible to UBC based on their previous plans from last year. Now, that being said, our degree-specific prerequisites are very, very important, and depending on which campus you're applying to, those degree-specific prerequisites can change between programs. So that's the reason why I mentioned the different campuses and the availability on those campuses from our previous viewbook slide. Now, the second part of our admissions to UBC is our personal profile. The personal profile is just as important as the academic profile that your students are going to be submitting to UBC. Now, the personal profile is the overall picture of who your students are as people outside of school. So in the personal profile, we usually start with a couple of questions. So there's 5 to 7 questions based on which program that they're applying to. Some of our more competitive programs will have a bit more questions, but the best way to sort of help your students through this part is to think of it as like a journal entry, all right? We're trying to figure out not only what the students have done in the past, but also what they learned from what they've done, right? We really like to see our students as a whole person, and it's specific to who they are. We don't want anybody else to write these for our students because we want to see not only their experiences, but their views on their experiences. Now, the thing with the personal profile is that these are read specifically by Indigenous readers for our Indigenous applicants. We have a team that helps with this non-academic evaluation, and these are some of the things that we look at as readers. So engagements, accomplishments, leaderships, substance, and voice. So these are big things for our students to highlight in the personal profile. Now, a lot of the times we see students who want to be modest or want to hold back from some of these engagements or accomplishments. And on the personal profile, we say, it's your time to brag. It's your time to step out of that comfort zone of being modest and humble and tell us what you've done and what you've experienced from what you've done. The last thing that I'm going to be talking about today is self-identification. Now, this is common across multiple colleges and universities, but so you know, the self-identification process at a majority of these institutions is voluntary. Here at UBC, it is also voluntary for our students who decide to apply. But without actually self-identifying, we won't be able to put your application through as an Indigenous student, and your personal profile won't actually be read by those Indigenous readers unless you self-identify for us. Self-identification also sort of opens the doors for some of the special awards that we have available. And one of the best things here at UBC that self-identification helps with is our Aboriginal admissions policy. Now, the Aboriginal admissions policy is one of those policies that we use here at UBC to break down any sort of barriers that may be in the way for Indigenous students to access post-secondary education. Now, this year, because we changed our admissions tools, which I talked about in previous slides, our Aboriginal admissions policy is still going to be applicable, but we don't know what right now or how those assessment tools are going to affect our competitive averages. But the Aboriginal self-identification is still in place for our faculty-approved minimums for all of our prerequisite courses. Now, what that means is that if your students are applying to UBC and they self-identify and they do meet all the faculty-approved minimums, then they will be reassessed if they don't meet those competitive averages based on those faculty-approved minimums for approval to the faculties. And just before I hand off, another really big thing for students who are seeking any sort of financial support, when you do self-identify in your application, this also helps us to provide you any sort of information you would need to apply for financial support as an Indigenous student.
Awesome. Okay. Thanks very much, Chett. That was illuminating. Thank you. So yeah, we'll pass it over to Claudia.
Great, thank you. So like Chett mentioned in the previous slide, when we come into the topic of self-identification, it is something that we want you to see as an asset as you go through the application. Because specifically for financial support, we can look at you and your students for the specific allocation of funds that we have for just Aboriginal and Indigenous students. And Ollie will be going over a little bit more about the Centennial Scholars Entrance application and the funds that we have, especially just for Aboriginal students. But when it comes to the financial supports that we have in place, we like to break it down into two different ones. So we've got external and internal scholarships. And when we talk about external scholarships, we are looking at sponsorship, possibly scholarships, awards, bursaries from other organizations, such as Inspire, New Relationships Foundation, Youth and Care, Urban K, Barber, Aboriginal and Transfer Awards, as well as government loans and grants. So those are just, it's not a fully encompassing list. There's still a huge amount of other external awards, scholarships and bursaries students who self-identify as Aboriginal and Indigenous can access. But we understand that these things can be really tricky and difficult to find. So that's why at the Vancouver campus, we have a group of enrollment service advisors. There's 53 of us that are designated to students to make sure that they're accessing these resources every step of the way, not just in first year, but every single year. And then at the Okanagan, we also have a specialized group of resources and individuals on campus to make sure that every student is finding the financial supports that they need. So when it comes to sponsorship, if a student needs help filling out band sponsorship applications, communicating with their band to make sure everything's submitted on time, if they need any additional documentation from us, that's where we come in to make sure that they're fully supported with their application so that they're not missing any deadlines, that they're accessing the funds that they need through their band alone. And the band, if anybody from the band, like the educational coordinator, needs to get in contact with them, we also liaise with them through this whole process. And when it comes to external scholarships, if students need us to look over their application to make sure that they're not underestimating their costs for university, which typically happens, or just want us to look over their essay, these are things that we also do to make sure that they're submitting the application properly and accurately. And then, of course, when it comes to government student loans and grants, these are things that we have access to. We have access to the loans database to make sure there's any errors coming up, if we're missing any documentation, that things can go really smoothly so the student just doesn't have to worry. We're we're there to support them through even external awards that we're not directly responsible for choosing students for. So we're always there to help students, and anybody who has been youth in care, then we also help students through that process of making sure that they're accessing the funds that are available to them. So when it comes to internal awards, Holly, myself, and the other 52 enrollment services advisors at the Vancouver campus, this is where we step in and we adjudicate a large portion of scholarships, awards, and bursaries at the Vancouver campus. So when it comes to the amount, just an overreaching amount, $35 million worth of scholarships, bursaries, work study opportunities for students to access at UBC. But that doesn't actually include all the Aboriginal funding that we have. So when it comes to the Centennial Scholars Entrance Award, which Holly is going to go into great detail about how to apply to that, it can go up to $80,000. And we have two $80,000 awards specifically just for self-identifying Aboriginal students. But when it comes to first-year awards or a full 4-year scholarship, we also have, I believe, remind me again, Holly?
Yeah, we have 5 $20,000 awards, which is $5,000 for up to 4 years, and 6 $40,000 awards, which are $10,000 per year for up to 4 years.
So that's just one of the many scholarships, awards, and bursaries we have. That's just one of them. And then when it comes to Aboriginal student awards, scholarships, bursaries, through Trek Excellence scholarships for students who have great grades, or the UBC bursary for students who have financial need who are still applying for loans. There is a lot. And we can list them all, but we know that's not going to make much of an impact. We'd rather you have your students come talk to us so that we can make sure that they're accessing these resources and making sure that we know that they're eligible and getting them applied to these resources. Now, when we talk about the internal awards itself, specifically the Centennial Scholars Entrance Award, I'm going to let Holly talk about this amazing award for a little bit.
Thank you. So the UBC Centennial Scholars Entrance Award was created to support academically qualified students who want to attend UBC, but are unable to do so without significant financial assistance. So as Claudia said, we do have ranging awards from a one-time $5,000 award to a full ride scholarship of approximately $20,000 for the 4 years for a total of $80,000. Following slides that I'm going to go through, I'm going to provide some information about how to apply for the Centennial Scholars Entrance Award. And the tips for this can also be used for admission to UBC and the Presidential Scholars Award, both which use the personal profile and other scholarship applications. With my experience as an award manager and a personal profile reader, I want to highlight how important it is for students to be able to tell their story in their application. So for the Centennial application, there's 3 components. There's the student application, the parent guardian form, if applicable, and the reference form. So with the student application, students are required to submit a description of circumstance. So this is their opportunity to tell us why they need the award to fund their education. For the parent and guardian form, if the students have been within high school within 48 months, they will need to ask their parents or guardian to fill out this form. In the past, we have received some concern of students who don't have contact with their parents or are unable to fill out the form for one reason or another, and that's okay. They can just tell us in their description of circumstance why they're unable to submit a parent-guardian form, and that's fine. The last component is the reference form, and within the reference form, this is basically 5 questions for the reference to tell us a little bit more about the student, what you think, how do you know them, what impresses you about them, and to kind of support their involvement in school and community, and if you know about their family or financial situation. So when we meet as an adjudication committee, really the description and circumstance by the student and the reference form are the biggest impacts in making a successful application. So just wanted to go over a few tips about applying for both the Centennial Scholars Entrance Award and how to write up your description circumstance, as well as maybe provide a little insight to the personal profile as well, because that these tips could be transferable. This is, again, as Chett said, the opportunity for the student to tell us a little bit more about themselves. The students should be specific and provide examples and, yes, brag a little. Really, the more content they provide us, the better. Within the description circumstance, the students have 1,000 words to tell us who they are and their situation. In the personal profiles, they have 200 words per question. So they should be telling us what's important to them, any significant achievements, and also what they've learned from the challenges that they've overcome. They can talk about their contributions to their family, community, or school. So if a student is unable to do a lot of volunteer work because they're taking care of their siblings or working part-time to support their family, we want to know about that. They can also talk about their interest in joining the UBC community. And one thing we want to highlight is not to let students list just their accomplishments, because we want them to reflect what they've learned from their experiences and what they want to continue to learn at UBC. In particular, for the description and circumstance, we want the students to touch on their personal, their family, and their financial situation. So Chett touched upon this, but the importance of self-identification. It is a strength to refer this to this in their award application and their personal profile. They can either talk about their experience as an Indigenous student or show interest in learning the Indigenous identity or being involved within the community when they come to UBC or outside. Lastly, I want to touch on is about the reference form. So if any of you are planning to be a reference for a student for the Centennial Scholars Entrance Award, the most important thing is to provide a candid assessment of the student's financial, character, and academic promise. You want to provide supporting information on examples of how they show commitment to their family, community, or school, and use powerful and specific statements. So last year, I remember one reference said, "Out of my 25 years of teaching, I've never come across a student as dedicated as such and such, and I think I never will." So those statements are very impactful for our adjudication committee. And if the reference supports what the student is indicating in their description circumstance, that's even better. So that helps us understand where the student is coming from in the context that they tell us. So I think that's it for me, and I'll pass it on to Claudia.
Great. Thanks, Holly. Before we move forward, Claudia, I just wanted to address a question in the chat box. Part of the barriers for students dealing with bans is the letter of acceptance from the university will often result in a refusal for funding from the band. So is there a way that you guys assist students in that interaction, in that relationship with their education coordinator in terms of being refused funding because they're waiting for the university to issue a letter of acceptance? Does that make sense? So they refuse to kind of go forward with the financial aspect until they get the letter of acceptance. So these kind of things kind of,
I'm actually really glad you brought this up because it falls into this whole timeline process.
Nice.
So just skipping over the dates and deadlines here, we always recommend students apply by our deadline December 1st for early admissions and everything else I'm about to go launch into.
Sure.
But what we work through in admissions is that we try to get our admissions offers out as early as possible to our self-identifying Aboriginal and Indigenous people who self-identify in the application to make sure that they have early enough acceptance letters to apply for band sponsorship. Because we understand some band sponsorship happens as early as February, March, sometimes June. We don't know. So we try to get through all of our admissions applications and really hone in on the ones that we want to provide admissions to very early on.
Perfect.
Now, if it's not early enough, they can liaise with us. We do have Chett and Monica in recruitment who can start talking to us in ES and enrollment services. to try and figure out what we can do for that student in the meantime, or whether we can possibly ask admissions to review their application sooner if their band sponsorship is much earlier than usual.
Right.
But it is something that our admissions coordinator is conscious of and tries to get out admissions offers earlier.
Cool.
And Holly, you've been in admissions, so maybe if I've missed anything.
Yeah, I think the idea is to get earlier offers out this year as well, to provide additional time for them to receive sponsorship. So.
Great. But even if a student has fallen into the cracks, like even if their band is, there's always a way, there's always a relationship.
Yeah, just reach out.
Yeah,
perfect. Okay.
And if for some reason band sponsorship is not available, that's where these internal and external opportunities come in. It's a great student who is not receiving band funding is a great applicant for the Centennial Scholars Entrance Award, because we understand that there is a relatively large financial need without the band sponsorship coming into play. So the Centennial Scholars Entrance Award is always something that we recommend students apply to anyways, just in case band funding is not available that year.
And if band funding is available, still apply for the Centennial Scholars Entrance Award, because we can fill any unmet need as well through that.
Yeah.
Because we are aware that band sponsorship varies across the board. So not everybody has all their expenses covered. And by just even say you're receiving all of your tuition paid for, you're still a great candidate for Centennial Scholars Entrance Award to cover your other living expenses, your books, and other costs that come with going to school.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Can I just
particularly if you're coming into Vancouver as I did, it's a very expensive city to live. I was lucky to be band sponsored as well, but it was a tough time, and so these kind of types of awards can really help make the experience just that much easier, which allows you to focus on your studies, right? And
for sure.
Kind of put your effort where it needs to be, so that you can achieve whatever it is that you want.
And that's the whole point of these scholarships, boards, and bursaries, is to make sure students are accessing their potential without the worry of finances and the pressing costs of education. Instead, we try and just reduce one less barrier, one less stress factor to make sure that it's a little bit easier to access.
Great. Awesome. Thank you both.
No problem. So when it comes to the deadline of applying, if students are, let's say they're looking at going to UBC next year, whether they're a mature student, transfer student from college, and they want to start in the summer, or whether they want to start in September of 2019. There are two deadlines that we want students to be aware of. December 1st is what we consider our early or competitive admissions deadline. So students would like to be considered for early offers, which usually go around in February. And any student who self-identifies as Aboriginal or Indigenous on the application will also hopefully be getting you an offer by then. We will be considering you for early offers, but for the financial pieces, we'll look at you for Presidential Scholars Entrance Awards, which you're automatically going to be considered for as long as you apply by December 1st. The Presidential Scholars Entrance Award is based on merit. So students who have really great grades, who are doing really good academically, that might be a financial route for them. But marks aside, merit aside, if a student has any bit of financial need, like we've talked about, whether they're getting band funding or not, we want them to hopefully apply by December 1st, because the Centennial Scholars Entrance Award is also due by December 1st. So it's a 2-application process. So they apply to UBC by December 1st, and then they submit the separate application for the Centennial Scholars Entrance Award by then as well. So if students want to be considered for early admissions or for the Centennial Scholars Entrance Award, December 1st is a really good deadline. If none of those three things interest the student, then they have until January 15th. And that's when some students want to work a little bit more on their personal profile. Maybe they want to hone in on their reference forms, reference letters. They really want to make sure that they've put the time in to the application. Then they have until January 15th as well. So it's between those two deadlines, students just have to do a bit of self-reflection to decide which one's going to be the best application deadline for them. And then just make sure that at the very latest, January 15th is the one that they apply by.
Great.
So the way that'll look for students when we look at the application process, so we talked about December 1st and January 15th, those two different deadlines. And around December 15th is when we're going to get the grade information to start making those early admissions or those competitive admissions offers and start reviewing admissions applications received by December 1st. And then early February is when we hope to have that answer for our students. And for most band sponsorship, that is early enough. But like I said, if for any reason you are aware of an earlier deadline for band sponsorship, then please communicate with us so that we can make sure we're doing what we can to make sure you're still accessing the financial supports you need in order to go to UBC. Once that's done, we also have 2 really amazing events. And this is another benefit of self-identifying on the application is admissions and finances aside, we also have 2 dedicated events that students can take full advantage of at the Vancouver or the Okanagan campus. At the Vancouver campus, it's only just for our Aboriginal and Indigenous students who've self-identified, and that's Aboriginal Destination UBC, which happens from April 26th to 28th. Chett and I were there the whole weekend. It was a great event where students get to stay on campus. They get to experience the residents. They get to see other students who are in the exact same boat as them, trying to make a decision. And these are for students who are coming straight from high school and choosing the Vancouver campus. Or there's the Okanagan campus as well, which has a destination UBC from May 9th to 12th. And I mean, if a student is trying to figure out whether they can see themselves studying, living, playing at either of our campuses, these are 2 really great events to try and make that decision and see whether they can find a home at either of our campuses or find a place in the community that we offer them. And then June 15th is the end date for most of our offers going out. But like I said, we try to have most of our offers or our offers given to students much, much earlier than June 15th. And just to touch on the 2 big events, we've got the Destination UBC at both of our campuses. Destination UBC at the Vancouver campus is just for our Aboriginal and Indigenous students. It's usually about 20 to 25 students. And it's a really great event, like I said. And then there's Jumpstart at UBC. So that's where students get a full day event. It's available for everybody, whether they're a prospective student or so Jumpstart, I'm thinking of a different event here.
Mm-hmm.
Jumpstart just before they move in.
Yeah, so it's a week before school starts.
Mm-hmm.
It's orientation.
Yeah. Sorry, I was thinking of our other big event at the Vancouver campus, which is UBC Welcomes You. So there's UBC Welcomes You, which is available for everybody. And then Jumpstart is for students right before they begin their education at UBC to jumpstart their process and getting comfortable on campus and feeling comfortable.
So they move in a little early. Is that what happens with Jumpstart?
Oh, we do. So it's split into commuter students and students who are living residents for first year, and they have their own programming, and it's just to be able to get to know your community a week before school starts.
And Indigenous students can access that as well.
Oh, for sure.
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, that's that would be a really great opportunity. I know, like particularly if you're coming from community, from a smaller community, perhaps. Any of these events, but particularly Jumpstart, because when you first get here in the classes, it's very, I would say, overwhelming, especially if you're coming to UBC Vancouver. It's a huge place. There's lots to find out. Yeah, I think Jumpstart would be a fantastic program, even just to get a handle on where your classes are, right, on campus. So, yeah.
And I believe last year, if I might be mistaken, but the Longhouse also had a session for self-identifying Indigenous students, so that if they hadn't met other Aboriginal and Indigenous students at Destination UBC at the Vancouver campus yet, then they have this other opportunity to make connections with support systems on campus, the Longhouse, elders. Elder Larry Grant, I think, was there, and he's just an absolute hoot. So it's a really great opportunity to really start making those connections and find those micro communities at either the Okanagan or the Vancouver campus.
Yeah, and the connections you build there, those relationships are really going to help you to kind of progress through your degree, whether or not you're at UBCO or UBC.
Yeah.
So,
Sorry, Chett has something to add.
Oh, yeah.
Hi, folks. Me again. I just wanted to add in here that UBC Welcomes You for all of our admitted students is hosted not only in BC, but we have major events in cities all across Canada. So Calgary, Toronto are some of our larger ones, but we do host them across Canada. And then specifically for the Destination UBC program on the Vancouver campus. It is specific for Indigenous students. And then the Destination UBC program on our Okanagan campus is open for all of our admits to the Okanagan campus. And then we have our day and a half programming specifically for Indigenous students. We fly them out earlier. And I've seen such huge connections start with our students who are admitted to the Okanagan campus and who decided to attend Destination UBC Okanagan. The students who attended last year are roommates this year, so I see them walk in the halls all the time, and they have classes together. And especially the ones who were in similar programs, you know, just starting off earlier and building out those connections, building out those communities was huge. And with those communities, you have a better chance of success when you're actually enrolled in schools here. But yeah, thank you very much. That's pretty much all I wanted to add there. But yeah.
Awesome. Thanks very much for that, Chett. It was great.
That's pretty much it. Just on the topic of connecting and connections, we do have our contact information, and like we said, we're not the only ones that you can connect with, but we are open to communication. If you have any questions, Holly and I, we do specifically like financial advising, and if you have any questions about that. But of course, Chett can also field those questions, and if there's anything that we can't handle, we'll ask Chett, and if there's anything Chett can't handle, he'll ask us. So it's a lot of collaboration when it comes to connecting with us. But definitely, if you have a question, there's no silly questions out there. We want to make sure that we're answering everything that we can for you to make sure you, as well as your students, are fully supported through this whole process.
Yeah, and if you have any particular questions about the Centennial Scholars Entrance Award, my email's there, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, I can definitely attest to that. I think before I got to UBC, I exchanged maybe 30 emails with advisors asking the silliest little questions and then really large questions. And I can confidently say that I wouldn't have made it and might not be here without, you know, the work that people like yourselves do. So it's really impactful. I appreciate it. So I think we'll just wait. I have a question of my own, and while we're doing that, if you want to just populate the chat box, if you have any questions at all for them that you'd like to address on camera, please feel free to do that. But kind of going back a little bit, Chett mentioned in the personal profile, I think it was, in terms of things that you should talk about, this category of substance and voice. Could you maybe provide a little bit of illumination as to what that means? To me, those seem kind of general. Like, what do you mean by substance?
So I think Holly and I can both answer this.
Sure.
For me, substance and voice, and it's a lot of just making sure that a student has like a mature voice in their application, that there's no grammatical errors. It's very obvious that they've put the work into it.
Yeah. And
then the content of it, the substance, is the piece where you can read it and then really feel what they're trying to tell us. What they are saying is genuine, that it's what they've learned from an experience, what might have changed them, or what an experience might have taught them. We're looking at more that reflective piece than just a list of all the experiences that they've told us.
Right.
My favorite example is student can travel to 20 different countries. If they list it all, that's cool. But if a student traveled to 2 different countries and can tell us what they learned from that culture, what they learned from that experience, maybe what it would have, what experience or what feelings it might have elicited in them, that's a more substantial personal profile than somebody who's traveled to all these
X number of places.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I usually say, like, you don't want a laundry list. You want to be more descriptive. And so now you participated in this. So what? You need to tell how that affects you, what you learned from it, and how does that impact you for the future. So does that change what you want to study, or how you feel about a certain thing? And so we just want to know more.
Yeah. So you shouldn't even feel shy about sharing things that might not even be all that outstanding, as long as you have substance and voice to the way that you speak about the experience. It's not necessarily if you don't have, if you were never a national champion in something, it doesn't mean that you can't write that maybe you were a competitive soccer player, right? Even if you didn't win a championship, as long as you can talk about that process and what it meant for you and how that impacted you.
Yeah, I think Claudia said a really good word, reflective, is like what we want to be. Yeah.
And we've read some personal profiles where they're not like the engineer winner or the robotics champion, or they're not the scholar of their school, but they have, their personal profile tells us that they've tried extremely hard in school. They've gotten to the point where they might not have been able to take on any volunteer experience because they had this other commitment. And that's still, it can be a still very substantial personal profile, even if they don't have that massive laundry list of volunteer experience or that work experience. Even if it's just one, it could still be a really impactful experience that they can tell us about.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, Chett has something to say.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, going along with this theme of working through the personal profile is the experience from that Indigenous point of view as well, right? Like we're talking about experiences that may not even come to mind. So one of the things for me was growing up in powwow, and growing up in culture and what that actually means to you. That's the point and purpose of us having Indigenous readers covering Indigenous personal profiles as well, is so that we have that understanding of what that means for students coming from our background. Another really big thing that I've read in personal profiles is looking after siblings. You don't actually realize how much that takes in order to do that and to do school successfully. And to be able to talk about that in a reflective voice, while still showing that you are a successful student, you are a successful older brother or older sister or whatever, and that you're still able to learn from that and want to pursue education after that. So those are really big pieces that we look at and look more in depth on personal profiles and why we have this holistic read.
Okay, December 15th is the initial transcript download. If student has more than 6 grade 12 courses with good marks and a 7th that's low, how might this affect entrance? Or do you advise that they just drop the course with the lower mark, or the course that they might get the lower mark in?
Do you want to take this one?
Yeah. So for the 6 courses, I think you're referring to the 6 academic and non-academic courses. That's if the courses are non-academic, they won't be used in the average anyhow. But if the courses are academic in nature, admissions calculates averages slightly differently this year. It'll be an overall average on all academic courses, and then a core average on all applicable courses to their degree. So if this 7th course that they're taking is academic in nature and it's not within their core, so it's say they're interested in science and it's a language course, and they're wondering if they need to drop it, and if it's going to be their lowest mark for the overall average, it'll get dropped anyways, and it wouldn't be included in the core average, so that's okay. So we want students to be able to expand their horizons and take those courses. I don't know if that answered that question.
So just to round out the answer is that if the course that they're taking that's their lowest, if it's not related to the program that they're going to apply for, or not going to fall inside the subject categories that we're looking at for core academic assessment, all this will be found on the PDF of the viewbook that we're going to send to you, then it will be dropped. But if it's included in that core, or those subject categories where we're looking at the core admissions average, it will be included. But since we look at depth, breadth, and relevancy of admissions this year, which means students are trying hard, if they're taking above the 6 recommended courses, if they're challenging themselves, if they take an extra course, that might level out that lower mark. But there's no way to say whether you should drop it or not. Mm-hmm. It depends on the student and what their whole application looks like. If they're taking 10 courses and that 1 mark is bad, that might not be too bad. But if it's really a substantial course falling in their prerequisites, then it might impact their admissions. So if you give us a call, or if you just give us a call on the Enrollment Services Admissions line, we can kind of get into this a little bit more with you to make sure what is the best route for this student.
And December 15th was that initial transcript deadline. or the transcript of it?
Our first download that we're going to get from the
Okay.
ministry. Yes,
Cool.
that's correct.
Okay.
Mhm.
But I'm sure that you kind of take this information, stew on it a little bit, and you'll have some questions. So as Claudia and I'm sure Chett and Holly would reiterate, please reach out to them. I know I did it. Just do it. It'll make a huge difference. They're fantastic people, and they're there to help you. So with that, thanks very much, you guys, for coming today. I really I had a
Thanks for
great
having
time.
us.
Yeah, thanks for having
Yeah.
us.
I can confidently say I wish I would have met you before I started. I just want to insert a quick thing here. November is a really jam-packed month for us. Next week, we'll continue our Indigenized Partnered series on connection. Kim Haxton will be back talking a little bit about building connections within and with community. And that'll be on November 8th. Following that session, Harley Eagle is going to come back, talk to us a little bit about cultural safety and leadership, what that work looks like in a group setting or in an institutional level. And that's on November 15th. So if you're interested in those sessions, please sign up. We'd love to have you join us in the circle. I'm really looking forward to both of them, and I hope you guys are too. So thanks again to our staff and to the FNHA for making these circles and these conversations possible. And finally, I want to give thanks to everyone that participated today, either online, a video conference, or those that watched the YouTube video afterwards. We appreciate your participation in the circles. So we'll see you all again soon. Until then, take care.